right, hey everybody, and welcome to another illustration masterclass with yours truly, Kyle T. Webster. I'm glad to be here with all of you on this fine Friday. Let us know where you are tuning in from, where are you watching from. I know there are folks all over this beautiful blue globe that like to tune in for Adobe Live and learn about drawing and painting and design and photography and all those other beautiful things. So let us know what's up. Hey Kathleen, how you doing? Steve, Jan, Oliver, Cryo, Annika, nice to see you all. And I see that we have people joining us on YouTube as well. If you're watching on YouTube or Twitter, remember, I'm following the chat on behance.net/live. That's be.net/Adobe Live. You can check it out over there. And if you are going to be watching over there, you can enjoy the show, but you can't ask me questions because I'm not going to see what you say. So head on over to Behance if you want to ask me anything live during the show. Okay. Today we're going to talk about color dynamics. Now, I've talked a little bit about color dynamics in the past on my Brush Hour show, a little bit in Illustration Masterclass. We're just going to focus today on all the many benefits and ways you can use color dynamics in your work. It's one of my favorite things about how the brushes work in both Photoshop and Fresco. So today I'll show you a few cool tricks you can do with them and why they're just so magical, and they are magical. So let's head on over to Photoshop and we'll take a look at what's going on today. All right. Let's see if you have any questions, throw them in the chat, and I'll be taking a look. Hey, Bobby, thanks for joining us as well. Nice to see you. I see folks. Let's see, Warren County, New Jersey, Toronto, Canada, Peoria, Arizona. Nice. Watching from the UK. Very cool. Ireland. Folks are all over the place. This is great. All right, little Friday drawing action. So here we are in Photoshop, and I'm going to make a new layer and then come over to our brushes, and we're going to start the color dynamics adventure with just a very simple brush, okay? This is the Kyle Basic Inker. You can get this for free on my Gumroad page right here. Nothing fancy about it, all right? It's a nice inking brush. It's got a little snap to it, as you can see here. Very nice for clean inking work. Now, why would I use a brush this boring to show you color dynamics, you might be wondering? Well, it's because I want to start with some of the basics, okay? So let's open up our brush settings panel right here, brush settings, okay? If you can't see your brush settings panel, all right, looks like this. It's got a little brush with a little list next to it. Make sure you go to Window, okay? Brush settings, you'll be able to pull that up and place it wherever you like to arrange the layout of all of your tools and windows and things like that. And then you can do what I'm doing, follow along with me here. Color dynamics. Well, you'll notice with this brush that color dynamics are not employed. They are not turned on. But now I've just turned them on. The first thing we're going to look at, the most simple basic color dynamics trick is this. Right here where it says apply per tip. Okay, right here at the top. We're going to turn that off. Okay, and what we are going to tell Photoshop by doing this is that what we want is for color dynamics to be employed every time I draw a stroke. Okay, and I'm going to explain the difference between the stroke instance and the stamp instance here. We're starting with a stroke. Now, if I draw a brush stroke like this, okay, and I let go, let me turn everything off here so you're not going to have any weirdness. All right, here we go. If I draw a brush stroke here, I'm sorry, folks. I'm turning off color dynamics because I want to make sure this is really clear. There we go. You'll notice that I've maintained contact with the canvas the entire time, okay? Maintaining, lifting, maintaining, lifting, maintaining, and lifting. Now, if you know how brushes are made, what you realize is that this is an illusion. It looks like one singular stroke being created, okay, like an inking line. But in reality, the way brushes work, okay, if you know anything about digital brushes, is that what's really happening is this ovular shape that I have, this oval that's hovering above the canvas right here. That is my brush stamp. And the way we are creating the illusion of a singular stroke is that one stamp is being rapidly stamped, dotted onto the canvas in a certain direction wherever I move my stylus. And each of those stamps is so close to the previous one that it creates the illusion of there being a single line. If I open up my brush tip shape here for a moment and increase the spacing of that stamping, you'll see in fact that that is what's happening, okay? Now, thanks to other things like shape dynamics where I control the size, the diameter of the brush, with pen pressure and some other nice good things, we're able to have that stroke be more interesting than just a simple dot being dragged along the page. If I reduce that spacing again back down to 1%, this is the result. Okay. Now, color dynamics, okay, per instance of stroke, not stamp. We're going to talk about that now. So here's what we're going to do. Make sure that the control for your settings here is turned to off. All right, we're at the most basic point we can possibly be here. And we're turning apply per tip off. This is our starting point to use the color dynamics and explain how these work. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a color here. And I'm just going to go with a nice, let's see, like a blue, like right here. Closer to cyan. All right, so there's my nice bright bluish cyan kind of color. Now, as I draw, okay, you'll see that the color remains consistent with each stroke. Here's where things get interesting. We have sliders for hue, saturation, and brightness, yes? And what we're going to do is we're going to take that hue slider and we're going to adjust it up to 10%, all right? Now I'll draw some more strokes. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Do you see what's happening here? Every time I have a new stroke, all right, placed onto the canvas, the hue, which is the color, is shifting, okay? Over here on the color wheel, it's bouncing 10 degrees in one direction or 10 degrees in the other, and anywhere in between, okay? And that is the range of colors that Photoshop is selecting from to randomly pick a color that will be applied for the next stroke. So this is an example of color dynamics being applied per stroke, okay? Now, what happens if we increase that hue jitter? We go up to like 30%. Well, what I've done is I've increased the range, okay, the distance we can travel along the color wheel now to 30%. Now, of course, we know that the full distance around the circle would be considered a 100% shift, okay? So 30% is going to get us somewhere about here in this direction and here in this direction. Let's test that out right now. Sure enough, as I draw these strokes now, okay, we're getting a shift anywhere between our original color and up to about here and down to about there. So what happens if I push that really high? Like 100. Well, now of course we're traveling the great distance of the entire color wheel with each stroke. And there you go. So that is, in a nutshell, what's happening with color dynamics at the base of everything. The ability to adjust the hue, the saturation, the brightness, okay, by a factor of either 0% or up to 100%. And in this instance, what we're doing is we're doing it per stroke. All right, so let's say, for example, I wanted to paint some grass. I would do a nice green kind of a color here. And I would decide, okay, I want this to shift maybe from where we are right here, maybe 10 degrees in either direction. Okay, so we'll do like a 10%, something like that. I also want the saturation to change a little bit, so we'll do that at 10%. And the brightness, we'll put that at 10%. So it could get a little darker, it could get a little lighter. Okay, and then I just start drawing my grass. And as you can see, every stroke here is slightly different. Very nice. So this is a really practical way to use this. I don't have to go to my color picker and shift around and change the colors, right? I just draw all that lovely grass one stroke at a time and shift the colors, okay? Now, if I want more variety, I just increase the brightness jitter, maybe increase the hue jitter a bit, and try again. Now you're going to see more of a shift in one way or the other for that grass. Voila. Okay? So that's color dynamics with a change in the hue, saturation, or brightness per stroke. Now, this is a lesser known and lesser used means of color dynamics being employed in people's work. So I always like to start with that one because it's probably the one people don't know about. But now you are all in the know. You've got the secret info. You've got the behind the scenes intel. Okay. Yes, Tony, that is so cool. Couldn't agree more. Is that always totally random, Cryo? The answer is yes. It's a random choice being made. Now, I will say that it's an interesting point you brought up because there are discussions currently with folks internally. We've been talking about things we want to do with the brush settings and both in Fresco and Photoshop. And we're thinking about ways you could control this more. So I can't give too much information about that, but I'll say that it's something that is being discussed because it would be kind of fun to have some more control over some of those shifts. However, what I'm going to show you a little later is something where you will have some control over some shifts in two specific ways. We'll get to that too. But interesting question. What is a purity slider? The purity slider literally just means what's the purity of the color. Here, it's not that. Here, I'll turn this off. Here. No changes. Oh, sorry. You know what? It's not doing what I expected it to do. It might be because I have apply per tip off, and it might only be something that's applied per stamp and with hue. So 1 second. There's per stamp. That's what I expect to happen. It looks to me like purity just controlling how much saturation there is in the color, really. Nothing too fancy. But I thought that was something you could do without the per tip, which I'm surprised to see no change. Oh no, it is working. There you go. I just have to really make it extreme. Turn these off for a second. There you go. Yeah. So not much change though happening with jitter, I have to say. I guess as soon as you employ more jitter, you're going to get more purity jitter as well. But to me, it doesn't seem like it's doing very much, frankly, other than desaturating the color. And since saturation jitter can't control it being that desaturated unless you're just completely cranking it up, it might have something to do with that. But I have to investigate further. I've used it, but I don't usually rely on it very much because of saturation jitter being there for me to play with. So sorry, I don't have more info about that. Normally what I do is I stick with these top settings here, and I haven't really used this for anything practical. If we turn these all off again, we'll just do a little test here and see. Doesn't seem to be doing much of anything. Well, yeah, it's making it consistent though. There's really no actual jitter going on, so I'm not sure why that would be a jitter setting. Also with per stamp, it's not doing anything either, other than consistently keeping it less saturated. Curious. I don't know, you've stumped me there. I'll have to get back to you on that one. That's an interesting one, isn't it? All right, let's move on. I want to talk about per stamp. Right now we're talking about there being a per stroke instance of color jitter right here, and we've turned apply per tip off to achieve that. But now what we're going to do is we're going to turn apply per tip on. And what's going to change is that now per stamp, meaning remember what I said earlier, this sort of dot matrix printer action of dot 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 dot, taking the stamp to draw successive stamps on the screen, on your canvas, that create the illusion of a line. Well, now the hue and saturation and brightness is going to be changing for each successive instance of that stamp. All right, so let's take a look at what that looks like by doing this. we're going to go back to our brush settings, brush tip shape, and increase our spacing again. Remember this from a moment ago? Make the brush a bit bigger here. And then we're going to come back to our color dynamics. And currently you'll notice that I have no dynamics employed, and so this is what we're going to get. Okay? Not too exciting, is it? However, let's go ahead and bump up that hue jitter. Aha! Now you can see it's happening per stamp, not per stroke. Okay? Now if I turn off apply per tip and do the same thing, look, one color, another color, and one color, and another color. So that's the difference, okay? Per stamp and per stroke. So now that we know what we're doing with this, all right, let's move on to some more exciting brushes that take advantage of this and see why they are useful. And we're going to start in the Mega Pack, and if you haven't got the Mega Pack, make sure that you, in your brush settings panel, come up to this little drop-down menu here and go to Get More Brushes, and that's going to launch this page. That's going to allow you to go ahead and download a bunch of brushes by this guy right here. All right, so you just sign in with your Adobe credentials and you are off to the races. Okay, very nice to be able to do that. Very, very nice. Hey Timothy, happy Friday to you as well, and thanks for joining us. And Jamie is here. Hello, nice to see you. Vanessa, salut. All right, back to it. Now in the Mega Pack, let's go to the paint box category right here. All right, and there are lots of options to play with here. I'm going to use this gooey brush right here, gooey. And we'll grab a nice sort of yellowy orange kind of a color here. All right, and let's paint something with it. All right, put some color down. All right, now, what you might notice that's interesting about this, and maybe if this color is too bright for your screens, I can use something like this. It might show up a bit better. Let me know if you can see that better. All right, so as I paint with this brush, you'll notice that unlike most brushes that you paint with, it's not simply a flat application of color. There are subtle shifts in the hue, saturation, and value of each of these strokes, okay? There's also kind of an impasto kind of a look to the paint, if you will, where it creates the illusion occasionally of there being a little highlight or a little shadow or things like that, as well as some visible brush strokes. So where's that all coming from? Well, that's from color dynamics, and let's take a look at that. Inside our brush settings, here's color dynamics. You'll notice that the hue jitter is quite low, 1%. The brightness jitter is a lot higher. Let's push that up and increase the hue jitter. And now paint with it again. And what you're going to see is a slightly more amplified version of what we saw a moment ago. All right, so if we use a color like maybe a blue, paint with that, you're going to see some lighter blue, some darker blue, and everything in between. And every now and again, you'll get this nice kind of a thing happening here where you get a bright edge to the brush stroke next to a darker area, which gives the illusion of there being something like catching the light or maybe casting a shadow. Okay? And that is the benefit of using color dynamics per stamp with a brush like this. You can do some sort of painterly goodness. All right? Now, another brush that takes advantage of this you may enjoy is the creamy brush right here and the creamy variation. All right, both of these will also take advantage of color dynamics in the same kind of way. All right. If I use more pressure, I get a thicker, chunky, more paint with the creamy variation. Same with the original creamy brush right here. And being able to control the opacity with pen pressure like this means that I can do some nice blending between different areas like that. All right. Now the other cool thing about this is if you are using less pressure, the color dynamics are going to be less evident. So if you have an area where you want there to be less obvious color dynamics, so for example, if I were to push this up to 3 or 4% and push the brightness jitter up to 7 or 8%, and I'm seeing more variation, okay, in all the brush strokes there, see that? If I use a little darker color, you might see it more clearly. There you go. All right, so I'm seeing all that variety in there. Maybe I want some of that to be sort of toned down. What I do is I use a little less pressure, just kind of scrub over an area, and it sort of flattens it out. Okay, so that's a trick you can use like this. Less pressure, sort of flattens it out. More pressure gives you more of that sort of a textural look. Okay, so for those of you looking to emulate paint, traditional media, these kinds of brushes will go a long way towards doing that. And the way they're doing it is with color dynamics. So remember, this is per stamp, and we have a hue jitter setting, right? Saturation, you know, whatever, you can, don't have to bother with that one if you don't want the color to be too desaturated. And a brightness jitter, right? And then let's take a look at scattering. So one of the things that's happening is, because we have this opportunity to change the hue, saturation, and brightness of each individual stamp that's being applied to the canvas, you can increase the number of stamps that are simultaneously being stamped onto the canvas thanks to scattering right here with count. So this means that I have 4 of the same stamp being applied at the same time. However, they're not being applied one on top of the other. They are shifting slightly up, down, left, or right of center by a factor of 14%. Okay, this is a low setting. I'm allowing it to go on both axes, X and Y, so that every instance of that stamp, okay, is going to be shifting slightly. Now, if I go ahead and take my color dynamics and really bump up the jitter here, and I'll turn the flow all the way up and turn off transfer, and just do this. Now you'll be able to see exactly what's happening. You can see our primary stamp, and you see one color here, another color here, another color here, and there's a 4th one behind probably all of them with a slightly different color that's peeking out from there. And it's because of that when we paint, see this? We're getting this result. All right? It's those multiple stamps being applied at the same time that are creating this pattern work. We turn transfer back on, we drop down again with our flow the way things were. Okay, now we got a little bit more control thanks to opacity control with transfer. And then we come back down here and we just dump this back down to a reasonable number. And now it's a lot more subtle. Okay, and that's the beauty of this, is to have that subtlety and that ability to create marks in Photoshop that don't feel quote unquote digital in nature, because they're not perfectly flat color. There's some nice little variations in there, there's some texture, there's some unpredictability, and all that lovely stuff. And you know I'm a huge fan of all of that. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you can see how that all works. Now let's take a look at how this is useful for other kinds of brushes. Now we're just looking right now at sort of a painterly kind of thing, right? But what about things like special effects and other neat stuff? Well, spatter. Spatter always comes to mind for me as a fun thing to do with color dynamics. And so, for example, in the spring 2019 brush set, you will find the Pollock brush and the Pollock CD. Now, a lot of the brushes I make have CD in the title. And now you know what that stands for, color dynamics. So our regular Pollock brush does this nice spatter. Okay, isn't that fun? Spatter, spatter, spatter. All right, everybody loves the spatter. But let's look at the Pollock CD brush. And the difference here, though it may be subtle, is there are color dynamics employed. So some of those colors are slightly more blue, slightly more green, slightly more saturated, etc. If we go to a color like something like an orange, which is in between a yellow and a red, you should see evidence of this. Whereas some of these are a little more yellow and some of these are a little more red. So that is a great way to add some really dynamic, beautiful spatter to an illustration. And of course, you can always take those values and change them. So brightness jitter, we could crank up to 10. And hue jitter, we could crank up to something like 20. And this is the result. Right? A lot more pronounced. Isn't that fun? Imagine all the many ways that you can paint with this and use this effect. Now some of you might be looking at this, and as I continue to build up spatter and build it and build it and build it and just continue to scrub all around the canvas, it starts to maybe remind you of a little something. Anyone out there got a guess? What does this sort of look maybe remind you of? Think of art history, think of France, think of the mid to late 1800s. Am I giving you any ideas? What do you think? Steven says, reminds me of when you haven't quite properly cleaned your brush when changing color. Hi, Timothy. That's a nice thing to say. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Marie Agnes. Thank you for being here. All right, I'm waiting to see if anybody has... Ah, Kathleen has got it. Pointilism. So this brings up an interesting idea. Could you just create a brush for yourself where you could instantly paint with pointilism? The answer is, of course, yes, why not? And so we've done that. Of course we've done that. So if you look at the Impressionist brush set, which you can download from that same place I showed you earlier, all the Adobe brushes, and if you forget where this little button is up here and all that, get more brushes, you can always just Google get Kyle's brushes Adobe, and boom, it'll take you to that page. But let's look in here. What do we have? Oh, look. Georges Seurat, the Seurat brush. Seurat Control and Seurat. Well, let's take a look at that Seurat brush. And let's do a little painting with it. And voila. It's even got a little canvas texture. Could it be any easier, folks? It's like cheating, isn't it? There is our Pointilism brush right there. So you can pick your color, and you can go to town, and you can do some Pointilism painting. Remember, you can always change the brush settings. You can always change the size with the brackets keys. Size it down, size it up, right? But isn't this a great thing to be able to do? To paint some pointillist goodness. And because you're using light pressure here and getting more of the texture of the canvas to show through, as well as reducing the intensity of the color and the opacity of the color, it means you can do blends. I could pick a color right here in between. Pick this color. And I can sort of paint these over one another gently and back and forth until I get a nice sort of a blend between the two, like so. So anything goes, right? This is really what I love about working digitally. Just throw some color down. Like so. And I'm using, this is a big brush. I'm at 250 pixels, right? But we're just gonna keep it simple. We're gonna have fun with this. Make it a little smaller. Right there, we go a little darker here. Create some hair. Right? Go a little darker here. Create a little shadow under the head there. Some little shadows here where the eyes are going to be. Like this. And look at that. We're just going to town here. Getting a nice little pointillist kind of a head. And just kind of painting over all that. Make it really subtle, you know, very Seurat-ish. Everything was so subtle with those paintings. You know, you don't want to get too small with the details. You just want to kind of keep it simple. Just sort of suggest what's happening. Let me go a little brighter here for some highlights, if you will. Highlight there, maybe a little highlight right there on the bridge of the nose. We zoom out, and then we're getting that nice sort of effect of a pointillist painting. See? And we're really, I mean, think about how quickly we're able to do this because we're not having to paint each and every one of those dots, right? And also all the little shifts in the colors are happening naturally and sort of on their own, and it's a beautiful thing. You can grab another color and just kind of throw that in there, here and there. Just create a few dots, different colors. And you can do it in layers. You know, I layer in some sort of bluish tints here. Then I go across here and I grab something else, throw some of those on top. That just creates that nice random dot stuff that you see, right? And back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So fun. And then another thing you can do is once you've, you know, kind of gotten yourself started with all this, is you can go ahead and make a new layer and set it to something like overlay, for example, and then grab a nice bright color and take your Pointilisme brush and just paint over it like this. It's going to kind of tint it like that, and then you can selectively take other parts and sort of paint over them with a different color like this. And all of that blending mode is making it possible for you to play around with some of the color shifts and the ideas that you have there. You go to a blue here and go a little darker, kind of hit some of those shadows in there like that. Look at that, isn't that fun? And you can combine those together, Command E, and now you've got this happening. Look at all that. It's like in that scene in Ferris Bueller's where they zoom in and on the Syrah and Cameron's looking at it and we're like this, and then it kind of goes zoom, zoom with that Morrissey Smith's music. Magic. You missed some cool texture, says Sam. No, all of it was done with the same brush. Same brush. Okay. Yeah, so try that. Try that at home. Do try this at home. Unlike those commercials where they say, don't try this at home. No. Do try this at home. Please. You know, and if you like what you've got, go ahead and make yourself an adjustment layer. Go to your color balance right here, right? And do things like this, like try pushing stuff one way or the other. Playing around with the colors. Right? That's a non-destructive thing. You're just testing things out, right? Always fun to use the old adjustment layers there. All right, so you can see now the practicality of this and the beauty of this, being able to adjust hue, saturation, and brightness per stamp for a brush. We're looking at Impressionism here. We're looking at Spatter. We're looking at, and there are other brushes in here if you want to play around with them that will give you some ideas, okay? This Monet brush is similar, but look at the stamp. See, it's a different stamp. And because of that stamp, and what happens when you layer it over itself with slightly different shifts in those values, HSB, right? You're gonna get lovely, lovely, lovely things like this happening. So just imagine, you know, think about trying to do like maybe a master copy. Like take a look at some of Monet's paintings. Maybe that series he did of the cathedral in, I think it was Rouen, R-O-U-E-N. And try and get some of that under your belt. Try messing around with that. These brushes can help you do that. Okay. All right. Here's something crazy. Halftones. Now you know what happens with the halftones, right? These are also stamps. Okay, even though they're working with the background texture, we're still going to apply those colors. So let's say, for example, I use something like the cubed medium brush. Okay, so here's what it looks like, right? Making some cubes. You can go really, really light, just dots, and then go all the way to a nice, thick, heavy, chunky cube like that with the pressure that you apply with your brush. Well, what would that look like with color dynamics? Well, why don't we check it out? We'll go here and we'll open up our brush settings panel and turn on color dynamics. Let's increase the brightness jitter. Let's increase the hue jitter. Okay. And can you see what's happening there? You got little reds in there, little yellows in there. Now we could do it per tip, as we've done before. And because the pattern stays consistent, this allows us to do things like this. You want to get crazy? Try bumping up that hue jitter. Try bumping up that brightness jitter. Make things really crazy. And now check this out. Now lighter pressure is going to allow me to paint inside of an area. So watch this. Heavy pressure is going to get me a nice thick bunch of cubes like that. All right, now light pressure is going to go inside of that shape. See that? See that? Pretty nifty. Pretty nifty. All right, and again, and again, and again. Think of all the cool textural weird stuff you could do in the background of an illustration just using a trick like this. Okay? And think about how time consuming this would be to try and do if you didn't have this superpower available to you. All right? And we can increase the size. We can go to this cube large brush and do the same thing. Turn on the color dynamics. We got a much more crazy option there. Isn't that fun? So really, the experimentation falls on you. Experiment with different brushes. You maybe think, oh, well, why would color dynamics be useful for this? Well, now you know what you can do. However, I haven't shown you everything. I have not shown you everything because there is something very cool that we have yet to look at, and it has to do with color dynamics being applied per stroke, not per stamp. Now, we started off with per stroke and showed you that you could paint lines, which I was just doing with the halftone brushes there, that are going to change per stroke, right? And so we know what that looks like. I'm going to go into our, let's find it here. I believe it was summer 2022. It might have been spring 2022. Let me just check. I'm always having to keep track of my brush updates. There are so many. There's one every quarter. Maybe it was spring 2021. No, it wasn't. Let's see. I'm gonna find it, don't you worry. Summer 2021. Ah, yes, here we go. Summer 2021 brush update. Now, in here, you have a few brushes called Disastro. See these? What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at Disastro Spatter right here. All right, now I'm going to, as you see, paint with orange right here. That's my foreground color, orange. Let's see what happens. Oh, wait a minute. Ooh, look at this. What's going on here? How am I able to do all this with one brush moving in one single stroke? How is this happening? The answer, my friends, is this. Let's look at our color dynamics for a minute. Now, yes, apply per tip is on, so you think, okay, well, that's not going to affect the stroke. Aha, but look. Foreground, background, jitter, control, pen, pressure. What does that mean? This means that I'm painting with both colors at the same time, my foreground color and my background color, and I'm painting with everything in between those two colors on the color wheel. Okay. So if I were to take one color and make a gradient between it and a second color, all the colors in between would fall inside the range of colors that I can use with this brush now. In addition to that, I have hue jitter applied, which is why you're seeing the per stamp craziness that's happening with this brush. So what we have are two things going on. One, with light pressure, I am applying more of the background color, which in this case is white, okay? Why don't we change that to make this much more obvious? I'm gonna make it a sort of blue color, okay? Less pressure, blue. More pressure with my pencil, my stylus, orange. All right, in fact, we'll push that to like a pinkish kind of a red color. Now, what do red and blue make? If you know your color theory and the way color mixing works, well, they should make something like a violet or a purple, okay? So, if I use heavy pressure and I get a red, like this, or a pinkish red, right? If I use light pressure and I get a blue, what happens if I use a medium amount of pressure, something in the middle? Aha, look. I'm getting something closer to a, what? Like a violet kind of a color, right? And that's the beauty of how this works, that I can go from painting with heavy pressure to medium pressure, all the way to light pressure, all in one stroke, and get this beautiful range here, right, of colors. Isn't that gorgeous? And not only that, but I'm also getting some shifts in all those colors because of the hue jitter. Pretty fun stuff, okay? And that hue jitter is quite high, it's at 12%. All right, so that's why we're seeing what we're seeing, and that is a really, really fun thing. All right, we'll turn that off for a moment. And now I'm gonna reduce the hue jitter and brightness jitter to nothing, okay? And we're gonna get rid of the dual brush. So we have nothing fancy going on here. All we have is the brush going from one color to another. And now you're really seeing clearly what's happening with that pressure. So heavy, heavy, light, 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 light. Okay? But the beauty of a brush like this is that we are employing all these things simultaneously. So we have a dual brush, okay, playing with adding a secondary set of textures or stamps in the interior of the shape that I'm painting with the primary. I also have transfer turned on, so we have the ability to use pen pressure to control as well the opacity and things like that. And that's why we're able to get all this crazy action in a single stroke, okay? And just layer that on. So what this means is you can really do some dynamic, cool brushwork with very little effort, because you're able to control so many of these neat effects with the color and with the brightness and everything else, just with the pressure of your stylus, okay? And even if you're not employing more or less pressure, you're still gonna get color dynamics helping you out, okay? Because of this hue jitter setting right here. All right, so if we go back and reset that brush, take a look again. Here we are. This is the result of all those things playing together. So let's say that you have to create a really beautiful kind of action-packed background for something. Well, you could spend a long time on it, or you could grab a brush like this, grab two colors that when mixed make some really lovely colors in between, and then just change the direction and the pressure of your brush strokes, like so. And at the end of the day, you got something like this. Very painterly, very exciting. Okay, also very screen friendly because it's colors that probably would have a tough time printing. But for that, don't worry, you could use my fancy action right here and make palette print friendly. Bam! And it'll just make sure and transfer everything to CMYK kind of ready color formula. Those actions are coming soon, folks. You can do all kinds of crazy things with those. Excited for people to try those out. All right, so Disastro leaf, same thing. Look at that leaf pattern that gets put in there. So now you've got the benefit of being able to do something like this with the color dynamics. You go ahead and, like we did before with our grass, you want to paint some foliage. Make your foreground color a nice sort of a warm green like this. You know the drill. Make your background color a nice deep dark cool green like this. And then look at this. We just start painting in these cool leafy patterns like this. Couldn't be simpler, folks. Think about this for something like picture book work, okay? You're a picture book artist, and you need to do something in the background that suggests sort of a foresty kind of a thing. Can you imagine how gorgeous this would look? Think about this in a picture book. All that texture, every now and then you see a little leaf popping through and you go, oh, I get it, I get it. These are trees, or maybe it's a jungle or something with vines, right? See how nice that is when that pops through? That little leafy pattern right there. This is all happening with a single brush, and I'm just altering the pressure that I use and the direction in which I draw to achieve this. It really is magical. It really is magical. And it's all possible because of color dynamics. It's the only way this could happen. What do you think? What do you think? Let me know. Are you gonna find a way to use these in your work? I know you are. I know you're gonna get creative and you're gonna do something I never thought of before. That's what you're gonna do. You're gonna surprise me. See that? Leafy, leafy goodness. Just using light pressure or heavy pressure. If I have an area like this, for example, that's dark, right? That's my background color. If I bear down with my foreground color, I know that I can pop in some nice leafy bits on top of it, and that contrast is going to take me a long way. And back and forth and back and forth. Just amazing. This is why I love my job. Making brushes that do crazy things so artists can do crazy things with their illustrations. I'm not really tempted to just keep on painting until this whole thing feels sort of done. Like, maybe I'll use this. Maybe I'm going to do a picture book over the weekend. You don't know. Right? Look at that. So fun. There you go. Totally random, totally beautiful. If you did something like this and showed it to somebody, they would have to wonder, well, how did you do that? And they'd be scratching their heads, trying to figure out how you made all those shapes happen. And you can say, that's my secret. Well, we all know. It's the Disastro leaf brush, okay? Wow. Ooh, says Steve. That is insane, says Jennifer. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Thanks for throwing in that link, Annika. I appreciate that. That's where you can download the brushes, Marjan. All right. Gotta try these brushes for quick background toning, says Sam. Would save a lot of color picking potentially. Oh, absolutely. Indeed, indeed, indeed. Certainly, certainly, certainly. Yeah, you know, I know this is going to look like maybe not the most useful, but you could use color dynamics to make a little palette. Just grab your round brush. Do like a simple round brush again. Go back to my favorites and oh, here it is. I'll turn off my size dynamics here, or shape dynamics. Make the brush a little bigger. Imagine if you just do this. Let's take this brush and let's do that. All right, so now I've just got a round brush, nothing exciting. Increase the spacing, there we go. Go ahead and grab the color dynamics and take your hue jitter and set it to like 20%. So it's gonna be like an analogous color palette, and then drag it over here. Change your brightness jitter and do that. All right, maybe make that brightness jitter even more. We'll do like a 40%, maybe a 30% on this. And, oops, I went too fast. So somewhere in there, you're gonna find a nice, what do you call it, analogous color palette. And you could just duplicate it, drag it over here, drag it over here. And one of these you could, with your curves, you could just say, oh, I think I'll brighten those up a little bit. That'll give me some light colors based on that. And the other one you could just say, oh, I think I'll darken those like this. And then maybe out of all that, you know, just pick a little area like this, and you say that's my little palette that I want to play with. And probably all these colors will work quite nicely together, you know, I'm gonna assume, right? In fact, got a bit of duplication going on there. I don't even need some of those other ones that simplify it a little further. Right? Or you can use my color palette, Kyle palette. Bam. Just like that. Ooh, look at all these fun things you can do. But yeah, what are some ways, I mean, I want you to get inventive with color dynamics. What are some ways you could be using color dynamics? Maybe you're painting a brick wall, right? You just have a simple square brush, kind of a brick brush like this, and you grab like a nice bright kind of a reddish color, and get that creamy brush and just kind of go to town. And you know, like that'll be sort of your look that you're going for, and you want that to just change all the way through. What would you do? You just say edit, define brush preset, brick, go to your brush settings, shape dynamics, angle jitter of 1%, very small, slight size jitter, very small, roundness jitter, just very small, 2%. Go to your spacing, space it out. And then oops, do your bricks. Now you go to your color dynamics, and let's jump up to a hue jitter of like 7%, right? It's mainly, what we mainly want is a brightness jitter there. Okay. See that? The reason it's so light is because the stamp I made wasn't 100% opaque. Easy to fix that. Just go to a dual brush and change it to hard mix, and select something like this, and then expand that size. There we go. Now let's make our brush a little smaller. Make our little brick wall here. See what I mean? That's just a quick and dirty brush we made. Easy peasy. You need what, Jennifer? You say, I need that. I'm sorry, I missed the comment. The brick brush or the palette generator thing? That's something I built for myself, but I'm gonna put it on my Gumroad soon. It's got a whole bunch. Look at all these things you can do here. All kinds of crazy things. But yeah, we just made a brick brush. That wasn't so hard, was it? Bloop. Go ahead and change the spacing. Let's do it. Just reduce that spacing a hair. Okay. If you don't like the way things are rotating, get rid of that angle jitter. There it is, nice and even Steven. Okay. We come over here and we just make another one. This really is the thing about digital painting that is so lovely. Being able to create a custom brush on the fly like this, using the color dynamics to get these effects. Just think, I mean, there's a lot of work that would go into this, but you can customize it and make it exactly what it is you need for your specific illustration. Somebody else out there could create a brick brush, but it might not be the brick brush that you need. You might want your brick brush to do something else. You might want your brick brush with the dual brush, for example, to have some like different shapes to it, like that. You might want it to look more like that. So you change that dual brush, you know, and you make it a little more crazy, a little more interesting. You increase that spacing and make it do this. See that? That could be pretty cool. Scatter that. Decrease that size. Decrease that spacing. Now we have just a little bit of, see that nice random little texture is just popping through? How exciting is that? The magic of dual brushes, the magic of color dynamics, all playing together to make brush magic. And that's what we're talking about today. Color dynamics, that covers it. You've learned everything there is to learn about color dynamics. So go out there, make something amazing. And if you have any questions, you know where to hit me up. Twitter, although it could be going down in flames. So if it's gone, just hit me up on Instagram or go ahead and find me on my website and you're good to go. KyleTWebster.com. Kyle.t.webster on the old Instagram. And I believe that's down below in my signature, but if not, you know where to find me. Folks, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Everybody take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Remember to be kind, and I will say ciao for now. Happy weekend, and bye.